Hey, welcome to Mooney Reads. My name is Beck, and today I'm going to be talking about the top 10 young adult books that I read in 2020. Like I've said before, rather than just having one top books of 2020 video, I've broken it down by genre because I am extremely indecisive and read a lot this year. The videos for a lot of the other genres are just 8 great books that I really enjoyed, but with YA and with fiction, I've actually got a top 10 lists. So I'm going to go from number 10 to number 1. So let's get started. At number 10, I have On the Come Up by Angie Thomas, which I primarily listen to on audiobook through Libby. And this is about a girl who's breaking into the rap scene. She's a high schooler, so she's dealing with friendship drama, also a lot of family things. She's lost her dad, and even though it's years later, that's still something that's affecting her. I really enjoyed the story and the characters. I remember it saying a lot about women on the rap scene and sort of how people are pushed a certain direction when it comes to like popularity in music. There's a lot more. It's been a while since I've read it, but I really enjoyed this. I know a lot of people talk about The Hate U Give, which I read a couple of years ago and is also good, but not nearly enough people have talked about On the Come Up. Number 9 is The Marrow Thieves by Cherie Dimaline. This is a dystopian YA novel written by an Indigenous author, and this really impressed me in a way that I was not prepared for. I haven't really read a ton of dystopian YA just because a lot of it that I have read feels very much the same. I was super into Hunger Games in high school, and most of the other stuff feels a lot like the Hunger Games to me, but this one did have something very unique. And from what I can tell, a lot of the stuff that made it unique came a lot from the author's Indigenous culture. The focus on the environment, even the storytelling style. There are chapters that are just characters telling their own stories, and the way that they tell those stories is really connected to like Indigenous oral traditions and stuff like that. There's a lot that I could say about certain aspects of this book, but I would encourage you to go watch Brody's video on this. They are actually how I found out about this book. I will say the one thing that I found a little bit disappointing was the romance aspect of this. It felt very forced to me. Regardless, this is an excellent book, and if you haven't read it already, you should definitely check it out. At number 8, we have The Henna Wars by Adiba Jaigiridar. This is a 2020 release that focuses on a lesbian high schooler, Nishat, who is just now coming out to her family. So she's dealing with that while also reconnecting with her childhood friend, Flavia. And it turns out that Nishat has some feelings, and throughout the course of the story, they are pit against each other in a class. So it's kind of a friends to rivals to lovers story. There's definitely a lot in here, especially looking at Nishat's coming out and how her parents take that. There is lesbian representation in this as well as bi representation, both on the page, not just someone who happens to like multiple genders or seems to kind of only like women. It's on the page, lesbian and bisexual representation, which is great. I thought that this was a super cute story. I think that they deal with a lot of intense issues without it being heavy. So I would definitely recommend this, and I am really looking forward to Adiba Jaigiridar's other book that is coming out this next year. At number 7, I have Felix Ever After by Kacen Callender, which is another 2020 release. This focuses on Felix, who is trans, and one of the things that happens towards the beginning of the story is that somebody puts up pictures of him before transition and puts out his dead name. So the bulk of this book is him dealing with that and him wanting to get revenge against the person that he thinks did it. Throughout the course of this, he's also dealing with various things around his parents. His mom has left and does not really contact him, so he's having to deal with that, as well as dealing with his dad, who is supportive and has helped him transition, but he's not always respecting Felix's name and pronouns and different things like that. He also deals with trying to figure out his gender further and coming out as demi boy. And there's also different romantic things going on. Now, I usually hate love triangles. Unless it's polyamorous, what's the point? But this was one of the few non-monogamous, that's not a word, okay. This is one of the few monogamous love triangles that I actually liked. I thought that it served a purpose, and the purpose that it served hit me a little bit too personally in the feels. I won't get into those themes too deep, just because we would be here for a while. If you have not read this book yet, or if, like me, you are wanting to reread it, the Non-Binary Book Club is going to be reading this in January. So, you now definitely have a reason to pick it up. For number 6 on my list, I have Annie on My Mind by Nancy Garden, which is definitely a backlist title. It came out originally in 1982. This was a gift from a friend a few years ago, and I am so glad that I finally got the chance to read it. This book really impressed me. I had pretty low expectations because I've had not the greatest time with super old YA, but this was really wonderful. This book starts out with our main character, Liza, trying to write a letter to Annie, but she's having a really hard time because in order to really be able to respond to her, she needs to be able to figure out what exactly has happened this past year. So you get to go through them meeting each other and becoming friends. A lot of different things happen throughout the course of this book. And the way that the love story is written is so soft and so beautiful in a way that's reminiscent of another book that I will be talking about in this video. And I think that there are definitely pieces of it that also made me feel really similar to some of Sappho's poetry, which I read earlier in the year. I can't really put my finger on exactly what it is, other than to say it is the quintessential gay yearning. There's also a lot in here where Liza is having to go through her guilt. Guilt that she did some things perhaps wrong, but I think that that guilt is layered and entwined with internalized homophobia. I have a lot of feelings and a lot of thoughts, and I'm going to start crying if I talk about them too much. But all of this is to say, if you have not read this, definitely go out of your way. I know that a lot of people focus kind of on more new releases, but this is a backlist that you should definitely look into. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit dated because it was released in the 80s. High school in the 80s was not the same as high school now. But this is a really great read. In spot number 5, I have Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. If you do not know what this book is at this point, go to Audrey's channel right now. If you don't know what this is, you clearly aren't following Audrey, and you need to correct that. But this is a 2020 debut novel focusing on a trans brujo, Yadriel, who goes through, who's unable to go through his rites of passage with his family because they aren't sure that it's going to work. So he does it alongside his cousin without the rest of his family knowing. And in doing this, accidentally summons the ghost of a recently deceased classmate. And, of course, this classmate does not want to go into the afterlife easily. So, lots of chaos ensues thanks to Julian. This was just an absolute delight to read. The dynamics between Julian and Yadriel felt, in the best way possible, like fan fiction. The feelings that they gave me were so similar to reading fan fiction about characters that I already love. So there's this kind of just unadulterated wholesomeness that it just feels like a hug. So this was beautiful. All of their characters were really wonderful in their own unique ways. That goes for Julian and Yadriel, but also Yad's cousin Maritza. There's also a lot of really great things that I could say about the trans rep. This was the first year that I had read definitely YA that is own voices from trans authors, and I've got to say that I am just absolutely living the way that they're able to just tie it in as just another factor that ends up reading just like all other YA is really beautiful. I've read some other YA books that are about trans people that are written by, as far as I know, cis authors, and there's just something kind of clunky about it. And these kind of own voices trans books are a lot more smooth. Apparently, I don't know how to count. Cemetery Boys was number 6. Now, at number 5, we have Little and Lion by Brandy Colbert. This was an audiobook that I listened to towards the beginning of the year. I think I got through it in February. And I went into this book without really any expectations. I think I had seen some people mention it before, and it was just one that was readily available on Libby, which is the main reason why I chose it. And it ended up being really wonderful. It focuses on our main character, who is in a multiracial family. So she has a white stepdad and stepbrother. And it talks about this dynamic. And it also talks about her Jewish identity as well. But in this story, she is definitely dealing with her sexuality. When she was at boarding school, she had had a girlfriend. And throughout the course of the story, you can see her trying to figure out her attraction for a girl and a boy. And I mentioned Felix Ever After being one of the only monogamous love triangles that I've seen that's actually good. The only other monogamous love triangle that was actually good was in Little and Lion. Again, because the point wasn't just the tension and miscommunication and whatever. There was a reason behind it. And with this love triangle, it wasn't necessarily like, oh, who should I pick? Who should I choose? It's not like she's kind of with both people. It's her internally figuring her attraction, which I think is very different than a lot of stories who use love triangles as a plot point.
I don't know how I missed a huge part of the synopsis of Little and Lion, especially because this is one of the things that made it good. This, focuses on her sexuality, but it also focuses on her relationship with her stepbrother. Specifically, her stepbrother has bipolar disorder, and she is trying to figure out how to deal with that in a certain way, but really she's trying to deal with the change in their relationship dynamic, because he isn't able to talk to her about certain things. I don't want to get in too deep because it would give away plot details. But I think that it talks about mental health in a pretty great way. I can't say too much just because I don't have bipolar disorder. But from what I could tell, it was handled really well, and I really liked that there was a big portion that focused on that brother-sister relationship, especially when we're looking at step siblings, because as somebody who has only half siblings, people tend to talk about half siblings and step siblings like it's different. So it was really nice to see a book where the differences are addressed, but it's not seen as something huge.
So I loved a lot of things about this. This is one that I would definitely like to get a physical copy of to reread. At number 3, I have I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deaver. I wasn't totally sure if I had read this in December of last year or January of this year, but I double-checked my Goodreads, and I'm pretty sure I read it in January. If not, I wasn't making videos last year, so y'all wouldn't know the difference anyways. And this is a really great book. This focuses on Ben, who comes out as non-binary to their parents at the beginning of the story, and it goes poorly. They reconnect with their sister, who they haven't really talked to because she had been sort of estranged from the family. They end up going to this new school and kind of going back in the closet because of their negative experience. So a lot of the story is them really figuring out how to accept themselves and accept the love that they deserve in a lot of ways. This was the second fiction book that I had read with a non-binary main character, and the first one that I've read that was written by a non-binary person, and I had a lot of feelings about it. This was the first time that I had seen dysphoria articulated in a way that really spoke to my experience. Even though Ben and I might have differences in the details of our insecurities, there's a specific scene in which they're trying on clothes, and just the way that they describe it all really, really hit me. And in general, I also related to a fair amount of their, like, self-talk and their anxiety, which in some instances in some other books can really annoy the hell out of me if I see a character that's too much like me. But given the context and everything else, I ended up really loving this. I also read the Christmassy follow-up novella, which is just cute. So if you have already read I Wish You All the Best, definitely check out that novella. It's short and sweet, but you get a lot of Ben's character out of it. And it's just a cute, fluffy Christmas read. At number 2, I have Pet by Akwaeke Emezi. I actually read all 3 of Akwaeke Emezi's books this year and was simply blown away. The talent is unparalleled, and they also do visual art. They've got a poetry book coming out. If you have not tapped into Akwaeke Emezi, please go check them out. But in this world, supposedly all of the monsters are gone. They can't exist in the world, certainly not in the city that they're in. But one day, our main character accidentally brings one of the creatures in her mom's painting to life. The creature that comes out says that it needs to hunt a monster. So throughout the course of the story, she's trying to figure out where the monster is. There's so much to unpack from this story, and I will be here for a while if I do sit here and do that. But it is just incredible. It says a lot about kind of the realities that we want to live in and the things that we ignore when we assume that the world is as perfect as we want it to be when it's not. So overall, this was just a really brilliant book. So, of course, that brings us to number 1, my favorite YA book that I've read this year. And that is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. This story focuses on Ari, who doesn't really have a whole lot of friends, but when he meets Dante at the pool, they automatically click. So you get to see their relationship. You also see a lot of other things going on in Ari's life. You see him trying to deal with the fact that his brother is in jail and his parents don't want to talk about it. There's also a bit in here that talks about grief. This is just such a beautiful story. The way that Benjamin Alire Sáenz wrote the experience of falling in love with your best friend without letting yourself acknowledge it. The subtlety, the softness, the way that Ari has to come to terms with it all. I just have a lot of thoughts and feelings on it. And I've already cried on camera multiple times about it, so we won't do that in this video. But if you haven't read Ari and Dante already, please go read it. This one is set in the 80s, though it was published, I think, in 2012. So those are my top 10 YA books from 2020. If you've read any of these, definitely let me know about them in the comments below. And let me know about a couple of your favorite YA reads from this year. Thank you all so much for watching. Bye.